Hello, welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast, channel for film reviews, discussions and everything in between. I'm Chris Garner, joined with my co-host Tate and the Hour, and on today's show we'll be reviewing the 2015 biographical film Steve Jobs, directed by Danny Boyle, written by Aaron Sorkin, and starring Michael Fassbender, Kate Winslet, Seth Rogen and Jeff Daniels.
What if the computer was a beautiful object? Something you want to look at and have in your home? And what if, instead of it being in the right hands, it was in everyone's hands?
We'd be talking about the most tectonic shift in the status quo since
Ever.
I'm begging you to manage expectations.
Have I ever let you down?
Every single goddamn time.
Then I'm due.
Your Apple stock is worth $441 million. And your daughter and her mother are on welfare.
She's not my daughter!
You must be able to see that she looks like you.
We will know soon enough if you were Leonardo da Vinci or just think you are.
You're the only one who sees the world the same way I do.
no one sees the world the same way you do.
Everyone is waiting for the Mac.
What are people going to do with it?
It's an abstract.
You're gonna do that?
You're issuing contradictory instructions. You're insubordinate. You make people miserable.
The board believes you're no longer necessary to this company.
I sat in a garage and invented the future. Because artists lead and hacks ask for a show of hands.
What you make isn't supposed to be the best part of you when you're a father. That's what's supposed to be the best part of you.
I'm the only one who knows that this guy is someone you invented.
Is there a plan?
The plan will reveal itself to you when you're ready to see it.
Well, it's happening.
The comeback of a superstar.
Co-founder Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs is returning to Apple.
As always, we'll start with a spoiler-free section, and then we'll let you know when we move into spoilers, so we don't give anything away. This is an interesting one today because I honestly thought that I wouldn't get this film at my cinema because, you know, the report came out that quite recently, within about a week ago, this film has been pulled from over 2,000 cinemas because it only made 16.3 mil back in its current cinematic run. It was done on a budget of 30 mil and it's currently only made 20.4, so it's still 10 mil off, and I'm not quite sure it's going to make all that back at this stage. And the the other film that's been pulled next to it is Gem and the Holograms, which I don't even need to see Gem and the Holograms to know what that film's going to turn out to be like. After I've seen this one, this depresses me so much.
I didn't even know that Gem and the Holograms was a name for a film. It sounds like a kid's TV show.
Well, that's what it is based on. It was an 80s kids cartoon. And the new movie has basically took one look at that, threw it aside and done its own thing and made it sort of like a modern, mainstream pop movie.
Oh.
Like with the internet generation and stuff. I think the original TV show was something like a bunch of like teenage girls all have like superpowers and they all they're in a band and stuff. And it was incredibly 80s and awesome, I think. But no, with this one, like, you look at the talent that's involved with it. You've got Danny Boyle directing, director of Slumdog Millionaire, director of Trainspotting. You've got Aaron Sorkin, who wrote The West Wing and Social Network, and we'll talk more about the Social Network comparisons later on. And the other talent, like Michael Fassbender, like, his name usually carries weight if he's on a poster, you know, for a film, just him. And the fact that it's not making its money back, I can only blame this on bad marketing. The fact that last year, I think it was last year, we had the Ashton Kutcher, Steve Jobs movie as well.
Jobs.
Yeah, and it sounds harsh, but maybe not enough people care about seeing a movie about Steve Jobs anymore. Maybe they're just sort of over it. I don't know what it is, but it's surely not down to the actual film itself, because if you look, it's got massive critical acclaim. I'm just looking here now. It's got 85% currently on Rotten Tomatoes. Really high praise from everyone by the looks of it, and I agree with them, because to be honest, if I'm going to give sort of overall opinions really quickly, this is without a doubt one of the best films I've seen this year.
Yeah. and I completely agree. And I think it was a shame when we were discussing last week, are we actually going to be able to see this? I mean, in my hometown there are 3 cinemas, and I was still concerned on whether it was going to show at any of them.
Yeah.
And I was getting a little bit confused. I was seeing all these reports. I looked online, couldn't see it anywhere, and then I think it was a couple of days ago I looked up and I saw that it was showing, and I was like, okay, I've got to go see it.
And I mean, I remember when, because we were on a call, weren't we? I know we weren't recording, but you were trying to look for times and it was just not showing up, so we thought, oh, we're going to have to like think of something quick to review today. But I'm just looking here now as well that when it was first released, because it got initially it got a limited release. It was released in 4 cinemas, and it made $500,000 based on those cinemas.
That's crazy.
So that has made it this year's highest grossing limited release. But then it's just a shame that when it is released fully, you know, and I don't think it's got much competition really at the minute. Not until next week anyway with Hunger Games.
Funnily enough, it was brought out the same week as the new Paranormal Activity film. It was brought out the same week as, what's it called, The Last Witch Hunter, which are really kind of, hey, look at all these massive stars, it's action, or hey, look at this is a very famous kind of horror franchise, and we're bringing out another one. And they had to compete with that. And especially around Halloween, well, it wasn't Halloween at the time, but it was still around Halloween time. So, it'd be very difficult.
Well, in my cinema, when I went to see this on Saturday, there were 4 other people in my screening, which really, really depressed me, considering that when I arrived at the cinema, the queue was outside the door. And I was like, Jesus Christ, what's been released today? Like, there's no major
What were they all going
release.
to go see then?
There was a new Maggie Smith movie that had come out called
Lady in the Van,
which I had never heard of until I arrived at that cinema desk and said, like, what's everyone here to see? And then the person behind the desk was like, oh, this new Maggie Smith film. I guess because it's a family movie and sort of everyone can go and see it.
People are still off the Downton Abbey hype.
Yeah, exactly. And so I said, nope, I want one for Steve Jobs, please. I sat in that theatre and there were 4 other people with me, which really, really depressed me. But,
my experience was slightly less depressing. I had like 6, 7.
Yeah. So I just
people,
sort of got...
like, the people there, they were like all talking, discussing it beforehand, and I was just kind of sat on my own thinking, oh god, I'm here with all the other film critics.
Yeah, they like put all like their glasses on, notepads come out, pen comes out. It's like they're ready to take notes.
I just want to clarify, I did not take a notepad or a pen into that cinema.
I have never done that for a film ever. But no, when I got my audience was just completely dead all the way through it. To be honest, like they weren't even laughing at the jokes. I sat quite close to the front, got an aisle seat, and I was just like chuckling because Aaron Sorkin's probably one of my favourite screenplay writers of all time. He never lets up. There's never a wasted word or wasted page with his scripts. You look at Social Network as well. Love that script to death. I've never really watched much of West Wing. I think I watched the first few. It just wasn't my kind of series, but I can't fault the script because that was definitely the best thing about it. And to be honest, I would say the same with this movie, and that's not a slight against the direction or the performances or anything like that, because all are absolutely stellar performances in this, and it's beautifully directed by Danny Boyle. But to me, and we'll talk about it much more later, I'm sure, but Aaron Sorkin is the real star of this film, I would say.
The writing itself is incredible. I mean, not to spoil anything from the film, but the dialogue is the film. It isn't an action film, it's a drama, and the drama comes from the way that the actors deliver their speeches that they're given, and just the conversations between each character.
And to me, like, how it's almost framed, because I guess I can, like, run down the plot a little bit now. It's obviously a biographical film on the life of Steve Jobs, which covers 16 years. It's really sort of 3 scenes at 3 different launches of different Apple products. So the first one, you've got the release of the Apple Macintosh, then it's the Next, and then the film concludes with the iMac, and it covers the 16 years of Jobs' life. Goes into the whole behind the scenes before he goes on stage, the relationships with his team, with his PA, as well as his daughter and his home life as well, which gets dragged up quite a lot. And it's because of that, because it's sort of 3 small scenes and it's not really hugely cinematic in scope. It's almost like watching a sort of theatre production, I would say.
Yeah, I felt like that, yeah.
In that you've got all the characters just there in the room, some will leave, some will come back in. And as you said, like, the script completely carries it. So I thought it was very sort of theatre-like in its presentation. I guess we could talk a little bit about the production before we move into the actual film itself. So this film had a very, very turbulent production, to the point where I thought it was going to just completely get canned and just, like, left. Danny Boyle wasn't originally up to direct it. I think David Fincher was in negotiations to direct, which, even though he didn't direct it, you can see many similarities, as I said, with Social Network. And again, you've got the same screenplay writer as that film, so I think that there are a lot of similarities. Both were huge business tycoons, both had problems actually being almost human to people. They were very disconnected, very arrogant, and they screwed a lot of people over. So there are the similarities there, but even sort of in the direction, like, I don't know if Danny Boyle tried to make his movie like a Fincher movie, but I saw a lot of similarities between that movie. I don't know if you did.
No, I saw a lot of similarities between that movie. And whilst I was watching it, I did think in the back of my mind, this reminds me a bit of The Social Network. Not in the way that it was directed, however, but just the dialogue itself and just like the presentation of the actors.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm just going through it now. Sony dropped out of the project, and that's when Universal stepped in. We also had a lot of actors that were originally up for the role. I think I read earlier that there was a time when Boyle came onto the project. They wanted Clooney originally. Then they also wanted Christian Bale. I think that was David Fincher's first choice. He really wanted Christian Bale, which I don't know if I can see, to be honest.
I can see it.
I think he would have played it very, very differently to what we got. I'm not sure if I would have preferred that. I kind of liked Fassbender in this and thought he was brilliant for the role, where I don't know. I could sort of picture Christian Bale in my head doing it now, and to me it just wouldn't have had the same connection as Fassbender did. I think Fassbender played it the very sort of egotistical and just sort of detached from everything, whereas I think Christian Bale may have been a bit more, well, not shouty, but something like he would have been in American Psycho, for example.
Yeah.
Something like that. I think he would have played it very much like that, which I don't know if would have worked.
But hey, I can imagine him in a turtleneck, so...
Oh, yeah. He may have looked actually a bit close to Steve Jobs if he'd have got like the long hair and the beard and stuff. And even Leonardo DiCaprio, that was Danny Boyle's first choice to play him. I love Leonardo DiCaprio to death. He's one of my favourite actors working in the business currently. I don't see it, to be honest. But no, and then Universal picked up the project, and we have what we have now. So we'll move into it a bit more now. As I said, I outlined the plot, so I think we need to talk about the performances in this film, because alongside the script, that's what really shines. So let's kick off with Michael Fassbender, who plays Steve Jobs. Brilliant performance, and I'm trying to think now. I think that this may actually be my favourite Michael Fassbender role.
It's very difficult to find a different one, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm thinking of his previous roles now. Inglourious Bastards would be up there, but I don't want to say he carries this film because the supporting cast is so good as well, but I don't know how he keeps up the momentum all the way through the film. You see lots of sides to him, and that again comes from the script, but I just thought his performance was fantastic. He gets a believable sort of arc in the film. He gets redemption at the end, really. So I'm thinking this might actually be my favourite role I've ever seen him in. I know that's huge, like a huge thing to say, and I'll probably forgetting or haven't seen a massive film that he's been in. But no, I thought his performance was absolutely unbeatable in this film.
No, I think he played the character beautifully. It was just, I don't know, it wasn't him. I've seen Michael Fassbender in other films before, and I did not see him there. I saw Steve Jobs. Yeah. And that was something that, in real life Steve Wozniak said. He said, this is like, these people here, these aren't actors, this is what happened. Which I think really does give good credit to the film if you can get a person who was actually there when it all happened saying that this is exactly what happened. Especially for a biopic, because not many biopics get that right. However, I know something that came in the news quite recently was a couple of Apple figureheads outside of the people who were there didn't like the way that his character came across.
Yeah.
Because I know this isn't really spoiling anything, but the way Steve Jobs was painted in life from people who hadn't seen this film or hadn't been near him or anything, he was the nice guy. He was the innovator. He was the guy who tried to push everything as far as he could. In this film, in one sentence, if you could describe him, you would call him an asshole.
Yeah.
And like Steve Wozniak said, yeah, he was, and the people at Apple didn't like that, and they actually discredited the film, saying, like, they didn't like the way that they portrayed him. But if Wozniak was saying that and he was there, then it kind of shows that is very accurate, and I quite like it.
Yeah, I mean, the movie completely paints an absolutely scathing image of Steve Jobs in this movie. Not just sort of with his family life and sort of disregard his daughter saying she's not mine and everything like that, but even just how he talks to people. I mean, this isn't really a spoiler because this clip was released separately, I think, but the scene where he's talking to Seth Rogen's character, Steve Wozniak, in the orchestra pit, and, you know, he's being very patronising, and Wozniak basically lays out saying, like, what do you actually do? You can't write code, you're not an engineer, you didn't design the box, so how come every day I see that Steve Jobs is a genius? What do you actually do? And, you know, he replies with that I play the orchestra. You're a brilliant musician. You're the finest, you know, in your department. You sit right there, but I have to, like, manage everyone. And that is, when I heard that line, I immediately was taken back to Social Network, because that is something that I thought that Jesse Eisenberg's character would have said. But yeah, with Fassbender, like, he is that all the way through the movie, really. He does get some funny lines, but you never really like the guy, right up until, I would say, slightly before the end scene. And even then, how the film ends, it ends on a very sort of, if you don't know anything about the life of Steve Jobs, sort of like an uncertain and rocky future, basically, after that, I would say.
Yeah. No.
I mean, it does end on a hopeful note, but even then you're sort of left with, well, for the past, like, 97% of the movie, he's been painted as an absolute dick. So you don't know if he's going to carry that on. You hope that he can change, but you are sort of left with a more hopeful representation of what's going to go after that. But we can talk about some of the other characters now as well. Kate Winslet, who I absolutely love to death. She's a phenomenal actress. She was amazing in this movie. She sort of has to, like, wrangle Fassbender and sort of, like, keep him on track, and she's, like, running around trying to get him to the stage and stuff. But also she has some really good scenes where she just sort of has, like, one-on-one chats with him. She's really the only one. A few more characters do it towards the end, but who can talk to him about personal stuff, and he trusts her. We see that from the first scene where he says, like, I want you in the room with me so nothing kicks off because my family trust you. Or, like, they won't want to start anything if you're in the room because they've seen you around and stuff. And we get the sense that what's her name? The one who Steve Jobs was in a relationship with, who he's having to pay child support for and everything. What's her name? I want to get this sorted.
I'm going to get this sorted as well. Oh, man.
Here we go. Catherine Watson, Kristan Brennan, that's it.
Yeah.
Kristan. You know, she's in there, and we get the sense that they've probably come along to previous launches and stuff like that, because we get the sense that Lisa knows the people and the team around her. Although, one thing I will say about Kate Winslet is that when she starts off, I swear to God, she was just doing an American accent.
Yes.
And then as soon as they bring up that she's Eastern European, she then snaps into this American / Eastern European blend of her accent, which was great. I swear to God, and I'll need to watch it again, I swear she didn't do that in the first scene where we see her.
I'm 100% sure that at the start of the film she was Canadian.
Yeah.
Because there was a slight lilt to the accent, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And I was like, oh, that's somewhere up north in America. That's either Minnesota or it's Canadian. Because she was putting that thing on it, which makes it sound like she's Minnesota.
Yeah.
And it was really difficult to pinpoint that. And then suddenly she says she's Eastern European, and I still didn't get it. Because her accent slipped backwards and forwards, and I know that, like, that happens a lot. I have my accent slip whenever I go on holiday. If I go on holiday to Spain, I will genuinely... I know people will say it's patronizing, stuff like that, but I'll genuinely start speaking with a Spanish accent. I can't control it. But in this film, like, the only thing that I can think of that would kind of justify that is that she's moved over from an Eastern European country. Sometimes her accent slips back, sometimes her accent slips forward. She's still adjusting. That's the only excuse I can give. But throughout the entire film, I had in my head that she was Canadian.
Because I was aware before seeing the film that she was meant to have, like, an accent in it. And I was just watching it, and the first scene, like, the entire first segment of the film, at the launch of the Apple Macintosh, I just wasn't getting it. And then as soon as, I think Fassbender says something like, oh, that's your Eastern European charm coming through, or something like that. And then all of a sudden, the accent just snaps. So maybe it was what you said, like, maybe she just keeps flitting the accent back. I don't know, that caught me off guard.
Something that I did notice, though, was she used the accent more when she was getting emotional.
Yeah.
That's where it really came through. And when she wasn't getting emotional, when she was panicking and stuff like that, she had a calm American accent. So,
and, you know, if that was the intention, then that was a brilliant choice for Kate Winslet. And as I said, she was fantastic in this film. To be honest, there wasn't a single dud performance in this film for me. I thought everyone played their parts phenomenally well. Yeah. As well, like Seth Rogen as well. Like I will go on record, I have never been a fan of Seth Rogen. The comedies he's been in just aren't my style of comedy, so I've never really got into them all that much. And Seth Rogen to me has always been one of those guys where you see him in a movie and he's playing Seth Rogen in every single film he's been in. In this one, he's still very much Seth Rogen, but you know, I actually remember his character's name. It's Steve Wozniak. And you do sort of you do connect with the character because you do see where he's coming from. Basically, without giving too much away, all he wants Steve Jobs to do is when he goes up on stage at the launch is to shout out his team and the team behind the Mac 2, which was the model before Steve Jobs first won the Apple Macintosh. And Steve Jobs is just being completely stubborn, saying, no, that was a thing of the past. We need to think to the future. You were great back then. I don't need to shout you out now. And it's sort of his struggle and to change Steve Jobs, to make him act like a real person. And I think he says somewhere towards the end, like, you can be a decent person and still be just as talented, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
But no, I thought Seth Rogen was fantastic in the movie. It's without a question of a doubt the best thing I've ever seen him in.
Oh, no, he was phenomenal in this film. And it's something that's happened a lot recently with these comedy actors. They're coming forward and trying to do these kind of dramas and stuff like that, and they're actually showing that they can act. I mean, of recent times, the first person who comes to mind who has done that is Jonah Hill.
Yeah.
I mean, his performances in the last few films I've seen him in have been amazing, and they haven't been comedy films. They've been dramas. So maybe that's a thing where people from that kind of group of actors, I'm just trying to think, Jonah Hill, Michael Cera, Channing Tatum, maybe trying to switch over to more dramatic performances because it does show off that they can act. And this is definitely his best film that he's done. I feel like it may be the best films for most of the people who acted in this film. I think that Kate Winslet's, it's very difficult to think of one where her performance compared with her emotion and stuff like that. Seth Rogen is easily his best film. Michael Fassbender, also a brilliant performance. And yeah, the other characters also all played their parts. So I feel like Danny Boyle and Andy Sorkin got the best out of them.
Yeah, I mean, casting director in this did a fantastic job. And another actor that comes to mind as well, like the whole comedy angle moving into serious, is Steve Carell. He was in Foxcatcher, I believe, and he was up for an Oscar for that movie. And then I got a trailer for this film as well. I forget what the film's called. It's a new one coming out with Steve Carell, Christian Bale, and it's all about Wall Street and the banks and everything like that. I got that ahead of this movie. That looks pretty good. And then one more person I want to talk about. As we said, like, we could talk about the entire cast all day, like the supporting cast. Everyone was fantastic. But I want to talk about Jeff Daniels. This guy is one of my favourite actors. And like growing up, my favourite, and it still is my favourite comedy film. You can check out our
another comedy actor who's gone dramatic.
Yeah, exactly. You can check out from quite a while back, if you look at our list of videos, the top 10 comedy films of all time that me and George did, a top 5 list for each. Dumb and Dumber is my favourite comedy film of all time, and for so long that's how I just saw Jeff Daniels. And then since then he's gone into serious acting, and he's really shows just the range that this guy has. And I feel kind of spoilt this year because I went for so long without seeing him in anything. I guess he was sort of tied up with is it The Newsroom? He won an Emmy for it.
Yeah.
I think that might actually be written by Aaron Sorkin as well. But this year I got The Martian, and I got this movie. So I've been spoiled with 2 Jeff Daniels movies, but I mean, he's great in this movie. And, you know, he plays the CEO of Apple from 1983 to 1993. And without giving anything away, there's a scene in this movie sort of halfway through with an exchange between him and Fassbender, and how it's edited and the music and stuff. It's probably one of the tensest scenes in the film, and it really shows how the 2 actors were able to work off each other and just how great Jeff Daniels is.
Yeah, his presence in the film is always felt. When you hear his voice, you know who is coming onto the screen. You're like, oh god, it's Scully. Oh god, shit's about to go down. And I don't know, when he first showed up in the actual film, you thought, okay, this person's going to be the commanding figure. He's going to be the person who's kind of going to be keeping a leash on Michael Fassbender's character. And the way they play off each other because of that is phenomenal. I haven't seen like dialogue like this in any other film this year, where it's kind of that, like, they're rebuting each other so quickly and with like conviction. Like, every word that they say, they really truly mean in this character role. And it's just brilliant. I think it's just brilliant.
Yeah, as I said, like, I don't think we need to talk about the screenplay again, because I'm just checking our plan now. That's our next topic. We've already talked about it to death, but it is, as you said, it's so quick, it's so punchy, never a wasted word. And, you know, if I'm going with favourite screenplay writers, Aaron Sorkin's right up there, right next to Tarantino, in terms of how well he can write a screenplay for characters and keep a sense of pace and everything like that. We'll talk about direction a bit now. So with Danny Boyle, I've seen a few recent ones of Danny Boyle. I saw, obviously, Slumdog Millionaire, as well as 127 Hours. And I'm trying to see any similarities with his directing style between them and this. I think perhaps with the ending and how it ends on a more hopeful note, I don't know whether we would have got that with the David Fincher movie. I'm trying to think now how Social Network ends and what the final scene of that movie was, and I'm completely blanking on how that movie actually wraps up.
No, I can't remember as well. But something that I did think, the colours from Slumdog Millionaire when they're actually in the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire studio reflected a lot in the ending of this film.
Yeah. I noticed that too.
Reasonably similar. I don't know. I feel like the ends of both of the films were reasonably relatable. I mean, the ending, at least in Slumdog Millionaire, where they're in the studio, that part of the ending was definitely relatable to the Steve Jobs ending here with the launch of the product. And I wouldn't say that the dialogue in all of other Danny Boyle's films were as sharp as, well, I know that's nothing to do with him, but like the direction wasn't, like, none of the films you could relate back to. Like, none of the films that he's done in the past you can relate to this film direction-wise. However, the dramatic tension that you get in the film is partially down to the cinematography and what he's doing with the directing. and you could see that in the Olympic Games when he did the opening ceremony to that. And that would be the only thing that I could even relate to this film from all of his other films.
And it's not just that as well. Like, it's just, I swear to God, I heard this and I was looking out for it in the film, and I sort of noticed it myself. The choice of how he filmed each of the segments. Like the first segment when he's releasing the Apple Macintosh, that was all filmed on film.
Yeah.
The second one was shot on digital, and then I believe the final one was filmed on IMAX. So even just on like a visual standpoint, you have that progression with it. I mean, I would have never have thought of doing anything like that, and it's very subtle. I don't know if anyone would notice it who didn't already know that beforehand with the production, but I mean, it just shows that he's willing to just make that slight visual alteration. And I mean, you look at the opening scene, and it is grainy, and you get the occasional sort of dust mark on the print. But I liked that because that's sort of, well, when it was set as 84, that's what filming would have looked like. And I like that he was able, to bring that to it. It's very, very slight visual sort of cue with those different filming mediums, but I think it really worked for the film.
No, I completely agree. It was something that I noticed reasonably early on. I was like, oh, that's a film grain, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was thinking, has he put a filter on it, or has he actually filmed it that way? And it did kind of play with my mind whilst I was watching the film. And then the second one, it was a lot sharper picture. I was like, okay, so you can clearly define between the two different events. And then the final one, I noticed crystal clear HD.
Yeah.
I know that they didn't have crystal clear HD where they ended at the point in the film, but the clear definitions between the three different time periods where they set it was really well done.
Yeah, and you've got like the visual sort of, I guess it's a visual metaphor really, isn't it? Just sort of like the progression of Steve Jobs and the technology, as well as him as a person. By the end of it, he's a different person to how he was at the beginning of the film. And then very quickly the soundtrack. This was a weird one. It was. Looking at it now, it was done by various artists. There's no sort of definable score to it. It all very much blends in the background, and with a film like this that completely relies on the performances and the screenplay, you really want to be focused on that. So you don't want something that completely takes you off guard and draws you away from that. So in that respect, I think it did a good job. It wasn't a memorable score, but I think it fit the film, so therefore it has to be a good score. If it works for the film, then it's done something right, and I think that this one did. But don't be expecting to go out and buy the soundtrack to this on CD or anything like that, because it's not worth it. There were a few Bob Dylan songs in there, because I believe that Steve Jobs throughout the film quotes a lot of the lyrics from Bob Dylan's songs. So they work for the film, and I think one closes out the film as well during the end credits.
Yeah, Shelter from the Storm.
Yeah, and they work for the film as well. As I said, the music does fit the film itself. So I guess before we briefly go into spoilers, we'll sort of give our overall opinions, our recommendations. So Tate, would you recommend Steve Jobs?
Yes. If it is showing in your cinema, go see it. It's one of the best films of the year. It's probably the best film that I've seen in the cinema this year since seeing Mad Max, and it's got way better dialogue than Mad Max. It's got better acting. I put up in a fight against George Miller as directing, because he did an incredible job with that. But yeah, go watch this film. It's amazing. If you like dramas, then you have to see it. It's just not questionable.
Do you think before the launch of the iMac, they had the flamethrower guitarist from Mad Max Fury performing on stage?
If they have that at the next Apple launch for any product, then I will buy that.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd love to see a crossover of Steve Jobs and Mad Max. That'd be incredible. But no, overall opinions, without question of a doubt, one of the best films I've seen this year. It would easily probably go into my top 5. Perfect performances, brilliant direction, and an absolutely unbeatable screenplay by Aaron Sorkin. Please go and see this movie. It needs to make at least 10 mil back just to break even, and that's not even counting marketing and stuff like that. It probably won't do that, but this movie deserves every single shred of money that it gets.
Yeah. I don't
cannot...
go... Oh, no, you go first.
No, carry on.
I don't go see films twice.
No.
I don't. It's something that I don't do in cinema. I'll probably wait until it comes out on DVD. I am genuinely tempted to go see this film again in cinema.
Yeah,
I've only ever done that with one other film, and that was the Mad Max, because I saw it once in the UK, and my dad hadn't seen it, so we went to go see it whilst we were over in New York. So, seeing as I'm taking my time out of my day to possibly go see it twice, within 1 week even, then I would highly suggest going to see it.
And I think that speaks to the screenplay as well. It seems like one of those films that on a second viewing you'd probably pick up on a lot more stuff you maybe missed in the script, and little asides and humour, because the script is that quick and it does move at a very frantic pace. No, I can't sing the praise of this film enough. I knew, to be honest, sitting in that theatre, that I'm probably going to be in for a good film here. And it's just sad when films are this good, through no fault of the direction, the script, or the acting, or anything like that, and they don't make their money back, and then you get other pieces of shit that are released and they make so much money. Looking at Transformers Age of Extinction.
I'm looking at Last Witch Hunter for this week.
Looking at Jurassic World. And it's just a shame when sort of smaller films like this, that are more personal, with fantastic performances across the board, not just from the lead actor, they don't get much recognition. And it's going to be a shame, because next week Hunger Games is coming out, so that's basically going to be the nail in the coffin for this film, unfortunately. And it means, because films like this don't get much money, it means we don't get more of these kind of films, and these are the films we should be striving to get all of the time. We demand quality.
We might see this film again, though. Films usually get re-released around Oscar season if they are nominated for anything. I think this will definitely get nominated for something, if anything, so it might get a re-release.
God, yeah. This definitely deserves some nominations. I would, without a question of a doubt, put Aaron Sorkin as a best screenplay.
Michael Fassbender, best actor, maybe?
I know we haven't finished all the films from this year, but I definitely consider it. I didn't think his performance was great. Definitely a nomination.
I can't think of any supporting actress films that I've seen coming up that may take a nomination. So it's a very open field. I know that the actress side of the Oscars this year is going to be very open. I mean, there isn't any huge films which are starring a massive lead female role. It's very kind of, at the moment, open. So maybe Kate Winslet possibly getting a nomination?
Definitely, and I'm trying to think now. The only other film that's coming to mind, I don't know if you've got a trailer for this one, is the film Carol with Kate Blanchett. I think Kate Blanchett might be up for a lead actress role for that, but in terms of supporting, you're absolutely right. I definitely think that Kate Winslet has a shot, and I think she deserves to, because she was great in this film. Direction, probably not, unfortunately. I don't think Danny Boyle will be up for it, because there are a lot of great films coming out for the directing category. But it absolutely deserves some nominations, and maybe it'll be one of those kind of films that after Oscar season it will start to pick up a bit of a following. People who missed it initially might check it out when it's released on DVD and Blu-ray, and hopefully it'll find its audience that way. But it absolutely deserves that.
I think if Apple support the film, they'll stick it up on the main page of the Apple website.
Yeah, and
Problem is, they're probably not going to do that, are they? Because they don't like it.
And especially because it's been pulled from so many cinemas, unfortunately, they probably just don't think it's worth the cost to market it more or to keep it in theatres, which is a real shame, because it deserves it. But now we'll move into the spoiler section. We'll just go through some really, really brief scenes that we couldn't talk about in depth in our spoiler-free section. So really, we usually start these things off with what our favourite scene was, or any problems we had with it, and then sort of let the discussion go on from there. So, Tate, do you have any particular favourite scene, and did you have any problems with the film?
Favourite scene? I have two. I'm pretty sure that you're going to take one of them, so I'll take the other one. Put Apple II a mention. Give Apple II a mention. That scene where they're in the auditorium just before the start, and Steve Jobs keeps telling the guy from CQ magazine to stay in the room. He keeps telling people to stay exactly where they are and listen to what both of them have to say, and the massive argument breaks out. That is one of the most intense scenes in the film. The other one which you're probably going to go for. If not, I'll talk about it afterwards. Is the only other properly full-on intense scene in the film. And at that moment, I genuinely felt for Steve Wozniak's character and Seth Rogen, and just the heat between them. You could tell that they tolerate each other for that amount of time. You can tell that Steve Jobs is so almost egotistic and arrogant at that point. He's not going to back down no matter what Seth Rogen says. And it's just it's when an immovable object meets an unstoppable force, what happens? And this scene happens.
And it's brilliant in that it keeps cutting to the reactions of all the other team and people that are there in the room, sort of looking really sheepish, like they don't want to make it obvious that they're listening to it, but Steve Jobs wants everyone to hear it. And you're right, that is one of the most intense moments of the film, brilliantly acted by both people involved. I sort of have two favourite scenes as well. I mentioned one briefly earlier. Mine's the one where you have the confrontation between Michael Fassbender and Jeff Daniels in the second portion of the film, I think, where they talk about Jeff Daniels and like the whole firing of Michael Fassbender, Steve Jobs from the company after the launch and everything like that. It was how that was edited and the pacing of that and how tense it got. I absolutely loved that scene. And the other one really comes at the end where Kate Winslet throws everything off the desk and says that Steve Jobs has got to make everything right by his daughter, and she storms out. And then you get a character we haven't actually talked about yet is Andy Hertzfeld, played by Michael Stuhlbarg. I think that's how you pronounce his name, who says that he paid for the first semester of Steve Jobs' daughter's Harvard University career. And it's just the look on Fassbender's face. He's like, you're trying to take my place as a father. And he says something like, well, someone had to. And then after he sort of shouts him out of the room, it's where he's trying to focus on his speech for the launch. And you just get the quick flashes to his daughter where he can't focus on it because he knows that himself that he's got to make it right by his daughter. And then he goes out looking for her. That, to me, was definitely one of my favourite moments. And that was really sort of where the whole theme of the film and his character arc really sort of like shined, and then that goes through to the end where he lets her watch him behind stage and he goes out to her, and I thought it was the perfect place you could end it, where he says something like, I'm going to put 1,000 songs in your pocket, which is obviously the lead up to the iPod release. I thought that was brilliant, and that whole last segment is where the whole emotional sort of set piece of all the characters involved in the film sort of comes to a head. If I'm going to go into a problem now, we didn't actually find out if he did give the team of the Mac 2 a shout out on stage.
And that was, I think the final confrontation between those two was enough to satisfy me. It would have been interesting to see that launch and see what he would have said.
Yeah.
However, I think leaving it on that moment, because the film is about Steve Jobs and his confrontations between the different characters in his life. He's got the people from his past who want recognition from him, the characters such as Hertzfeld and Wozniak. He's got his daughter and his daughter's mother, who are almost battling him because he doesn't want to accept responsibility for them. However, he wants to be part of their life. He wants to not show that he's completely ignoring them, but in his head he is ignoring them. And then you've got like the characters of the people closest to him who do support him, in the shape of Kate Winslet's character, and Scully, really, I'd say, is one of the people who does support him. Even though he fired him, Steve Jobs put him in that situation. And obviously he didn't want to do that. So it's interesting to see the different characters and how they interact and stuff. And I'm actually okay with them not revealing whether the Apple II got mentioned or not. Because I was more concerned at the time about just the relationships where they left at the film. Just how it was ended just before the launch. We didn't actually hear any of the launch from any of the 3 scenarios that we saw.
No.
It all cut just before the launch. And I think if they had included the final launch, then the film would have just not run as smoothly. and it would have extended the time of the film, and I thought that it was perfectly timed in the amount of time that I spent in the cinema. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll kind of agree with that. It's just the only problem I could find with it, to be honest. But, I think that if he had have shouted them out, it may have been a bit too on the nose and maybe not a believable transition for Steve Jobs. I think that really what that scene served was, it was sort of the catalyst where it would change Steve Jobs and make him question himself to then make it right by everyone involved. We have the exchange at the end between, as you said, Jeff Daniels and Michael Fassbender, where they shake hands and they say, "Imagine the things we could have done together if we hadn't have had this feud." He makes it right by his daughter. He has the interaction with Andy Hertzfeld, where Hertzfeld basically lays it all out and tells him exactly what he thinks of him and says, "I've never liked you when you threatened me." And then Steve Jobs says, "Oh, that's a shame because I've always admired you." And then it was like, oh. So I think that the Seth Rogen scene at the end really just served as a way to get Steve Jobs to that point. And I don't think that we needed to see him shout them out on stage. It was just sort of the only sort of plot point that was all the way through the different segments of the film and never really got a payoff. But I think the payoff, as we said, may have been just that change in Steve Jobs' sort of reflection of the people around him.
For people who want to go see this film, I just want to just make a quick comment on it. We're making it sound all extremely dramatic and stuff like that. There are a couple of comedy moments.
Oh, God, yeah, definitely.
I think something that came through the entire film, which I thought was my favourite comedy moment, which happened in all 3 time zones, was Which Andy? Because there was 2 characters with the first name of Andy, and they always seemed to be in the same place at the same time, and he would say, "Get me Andy," and they'd go, "Which Andy?" And then he'd have to say between the two whether it was Hertzfeld or the other Andy.
Yeah. And that was in the opening scene as well, wasn't it? Where he shouts for Andy and he goes, "I'm right here," and he goes, "Why would I be shouting for you when you're right next to me?"
Yeah.
One of my favourite comedy bits, and it's a really, really small bit. I think it's right after the moment that the big sort of intense exchange between Jeff Daniels and Michael Fassbender in the second act. It's where he's walking with Kate Winslet and he just randomly slides down the banister next to her.
Yeah.
It was so childlike for him, and he just had this huge set to with the CEO of Apple, and he just doesn't care, and he just slides down the banister no one can take him down. He's about to go on stage. And it's a really slight bit. It's literally just a few seconds just slide down the banister, but it was something like that I thought was brilliant. I don't know if that was intended in the script or if that was a sort of improv moment from Fassbender, but I thought that was brilliant. I think we've pretty much talked about everything, really. I know we've got 2 sections here about Steve Jobs and the daughter relationship as well as Steve Jobs and Wozniak, but I think we've talked about that quite a lot. If I'm just going to sort of punctuate it now, I think that the relationship is very believable, and it's that item he carries with him all the way through the film when his daughter Lisa creates an image on a Mac Paint, I think it is, and he prints it off.
On the
and
Macintosh, the original one.
Yeah, we find out that at the end he's carried this printed out with him all the way through, so that we know that he's always cared about her, and I think she realises that too at the end.
Especially when he was denying it all the way through the film that he had ever really been related to her of any sorts, by saying the mother could have slept with 28% of the United States, and that whole thing. And
as well, a really heartbreaking moment where I think she's 5 years old at the time, where she says, "Oh, you named me." You named the computer after me, Lisa. And he goes, "No, you were named after the computer," or something like that.
Yeah.
And he lies to her basically, because at the end he says that of course that the computer was named after his daughter. But man, she was 5 years old, and he's just so a despicable bastard at the start of this film.
Steve Jobs in this film is such an asshole.
He is such an asshole. And you were saying earlier, people. Did you say that Apple themselves were pissed off about that?
They didn't like the fact that they painted him as an asshole. However, Steve Wozniak said that is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So, the people who are heads of Apple now, who may not have been present back when it actually happened, didn't like the fact that their old CEO and basically the person who made them exist was a complete and utter asshole.
Maybe
They
this
didn't
is all
like that.
maybe this is all a gigantic conspiracy, and that's the real reason that it's being pulled from so many theaters, is because Apple don't want to tarnish their name.
Doesn't
But
tarnish
no,
their name. He was a businessman, and that's how
true.
he's projected in the film.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think of anything else. I think I've pretty much said everything I can about this film. If you have,
we're good. Yep.
Okay, so summary. Go and see Steve Jobs. Without doubt, one of the best dramas you'll see this film. One of the best biographical films I've ever seen. Flawless script, brilliant performances, perfectly directed. Go and see it, support it, because films like this need your support so they can make the money so that we get more of them.
Two most significant events of the 20th century. The Allies win the war, and this.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Jobs.
Recommended movie, yeah?
Yeah, recommended movie now. So at the end of all of our main shows, we end on this segment where we take it in turns each week, choosing a movie that to review in our film club show, in our midweek show, that vaguely ties in somehow with what we reviewed in our main show. So today was obviously Steve Jobs, and Tate, it is your pick for a film this week. So I've got a vague idea of what it could be, but let us know which film you've chose and some of the reasons and the link for picking that film.
So, I wasn't going to go with the director, which I think I've gone with a couple of times now, going through the director. I do love Danny Boyle. I'm a fan of his films, and I was going to pick Sunshine, because that is one of my favourite films of all time.
I have never seen that film.
But I instead went with the Aaron Sorkin link.
Okay.
Now, I had two films here to choose from, and I was going to be playing off whether you mentioned either one of the films. Seeing as you mentioned The Social Network, I was going to go with that, but then I thought, you know what, we've talked about it a little bit too much, we've already gone into some amount of detail with it, so I'm going with the other film of Moneyball.
Okay, I have never seen this film. I honestly thought you were going to go Social Network, and I thought, well, we're basically just going to have to repaint our review of this one because it's more or less exactly the same film.
Funny enough, I've never seen Moneyball as well, but I have heard good things about it.
Yeah, I was just about to say I've heard the name of this movie crop up quite a lot. I know it's meant to be really good. I really, honestly don't know anything about it apart from hearing the name a few times. So no, this is... Oh, is it? Oh, okay. So this is going to be an interesting one. I'm just checking who's in it now. We got Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill, and Philip Seymour Hoffman. Oh, okay, I am there for that. So when did this come out? This was 2011. Okay, relatively new.
And it's also a biopic.
Okay. No, that's a good link. So we got the biopic link and we've got the Aaron Sorkin link. Now that's good. And we also mentioned Jonah Hill in this review. Yeah. So we've got that too. So Moneyball will be our review for Film Club this week. That should be up... What days do we usually get up? Is it usually Thursday, Friday? So expect it up later this week. You'll see it
at some point, yeah.
We may not be on time sometimes, but it's always uploaded, and that's the main thing. But yeah, be sure to rate, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought of Steve Jobs. Are you planning on seeing Steve Jobs? Have you already seen it? Let us know. You can find us at Facebook at facebook.com/cinemasavvy. We're on Twitter at cinema_savvy, and we're also on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/cinema_savvy. So get involved with those. Get subscribing, get commenting. We love talking to you about movies and all that good stuff. Next week's main show, I believe, is Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2. So we sort of cap off our reviews that we did on those. So yeah, look out for that, and look out for our review of Moneyball coming up later this week. So until then, thanks for listening.